Welcome to the debate. You know, for over a century, the boundary of work was, well, it was a physical lever. You walk into a sprawling factory or a towering office building, you take a heavy piece of cardstock, and you pull the metal arm of a punch clock.
Right, that definitive mechanical clack.
Exactly. You hear that clack, and in that moment, you are at work. The threshold was completely undeniable.
And it was a very distinct threshold. I mean, it was physical, yes, but just as importantly, it was psychological. You punch in, you give them your labor, you punch out, the work stops, the factory door closes behind you, and your time is yours again.
Yeah, but today, that clunky, greasy machine has been replaced by something entirely invisible and infinitely more precise. It doesn't just know when you are at work, it knows exactly how you are working, down to the millisecond.
Yeah, it really does.
We're looking at a landscape where artificial intelligence models our very attention and maps our temporal habits with just staggering granularity.
It knows if you're squinting at your screen. You know, it tracks how often you blink. It logs the exact moment your attention drifts from a complex financial spreadsheet to a social media feed. It doesn't just measure your presence anymore, it measures your cognitive capacity in real time.
And that brings us to the central question we are exploring today, drawn directly from the latest data on AI attention modeling and workplace surveillance tools. The question is this: does constant AI-driven monitoring and focus tracking in the workplace unlock unprecedented productivity by aligning with our natural habits? Or does it cause excessive stress and fundamentally compromise employee well-being?
And honestly, the mental health of the modern workforce.
It absolutely is. For our discussion today, I represent the view that sophisticated tracking, specifically when modeling deep work and temporal habits, fundamentally enhances productivity and well-being. I argue that it does this by finally aligning the relentless demands of modern work with our natural human cognitive rhythms.
And I represent the view that granular monitoring, which reduces deeply complex human behavior to rigid mathematical metrics and scores, well, it creates a punitive, high-stress environment. I believe it erodes spontaneity, penalizes natural human variance, and degrades overall well-being.
Let's lay out the foundation of how these systems actually operate, because I think the underlying mechanics reveal why they are so valuable. We have to be honest about the environment we are working in right now.
Very noisy.
Incredibly noisy. We are dealing with an era of unprecedented digital distraction. To combat this, AI workplace tools, when designed correctly, act as a supportive framework, not a punitive one. The system looks at how you work and identifies your natural rhythms. Think about a smart calendar AI. It doesn't just look at open slots, you know? It identifies your time leaks and the periods where your attention is fragmented.
Right.
By understanding that, it can automatically slot your most demanding, deep work bursts into your peak focus windows. We see this actively protecting the 90-minute flow states that are so highly prized in Tokyo design sprints or Silicon Valley coding marathons.
Sure, protecting flow states sounds great on paper.
But it works in practice too. These systems allow employees to block distractions at the exact right biological moment. They help us reclaim our focus and ultimately reduce the massive cognitive overload that plagues modern knowledge work.
The goal of reducing cognitive overload is noble. I don't think anyone wants to be overwhelmed. But the reality of the mechanism, how the AI actually achieves this, is where the harm lies.
How so?
Well, the sheer granularity of this surveillance creates a relentless quantified self-pressure, and that inherently degrades a worker's well-being. We aren't just talking about a benign smart calendar that blocks out an hour for writing so you don't get pinged.
It goes deeper than that, yes.
Much deeper. The tracking extends to highly invasive metrics using sensor fusion and computer vision. These systems use your front-facing camera to monitor your gaze direction. They track your blink rates to flag fatigue. They even measure the microscopic tilts of your device to infer if you are multitasking.
Which provides really useful data.
But at what psychological cost? When virtual meetings start analyzing your microphone muting patterns to detect if you've zoned out, and when attention platforms score your task completion speed to influence your actual financial payout, which is actively deployed in China's gig sector right now, by the way, the nature of work transforms.
I see why you...
It ceases to be a supportive environment. It becomes a high-stress arena where every micro-movement is judged and evaluated.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on how that evaluation actually happens. I think to really understand this, we have to move from the high-level fear of being watched down to the specific mechanics of how focus is mathematically measured on an individual level.
Okay, let's look at the math.
The algorithms doing this analysis are not inherently judgmental. They are simply analytical. The system groups your actions together to find patterns you didn't even know you had. It uses a technique called unsupervised clustering.
Right, it looks at the timestamps of everything you do and tries to categorize them.
Exactly. Think of it like a master librarian sorting a massive unlabeled mountain of books into distinct genres just by looking at the word patterns. The AI looks at your keystrokes, your app switching, your scroll speeds, and groups them. It can differentiate mathematically between scattered multitasking and highly focused deep work.
Yeah, but
We've all had that moment where we open a new tab to check one quick email, and suddenly we spent 20 minutes reading about the history of the stapler.
sure, the Wikipedia rabbit hole.
Right. That state has a high measure of attention dispersion. The AI recognizes that a 45-second email check followed by a Wikipedia rabbit hole is fundamentally different from a 20-minute deep dive into a complex legal document, which is a state of low attention dispersion. By mapping this, the AI learns when you naturally fall into those deep, highly focused states. So my question to you is, how can tools that explicitly help workers recognize their own distraction patterns, block those interruptions, and protect their flow states be a source of stress rather than a much-needed relief from our chaotic digital environments?
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. The stress doesn't come from the act of blocking distractions. It comes from the metrics the system uses to define what focus even looks like. These systems force workers to constantly perform attention for the machine.
Perform attention?
Yes. You mentioned the analytical nature of the algorithms, but let's look at the computer vision aspect you just brushed past. These systems rely on neural networks acting essentially as the eyes of the AI, but those eyes lack human context. They are trained to quantify cognitive load by tracking things like pupil dilation and blink rates.
Because frequent blinking and delayed pupil response are medically established signs of fatigue. If the system flags that, it can prompt a worker to step away and take a needed break. It's a diagnostic tool.
But in practice, it penalizes biological realities and situational nuances. Let's look at the mechanics of how it fails. If I am staring at my screen and I start squinting, the camera logs that as cognitive strain or perhaps a drop in engagement.
Which it very well might be.
But maybe the afternoon sun is just hitting my monitor and causing a glare. Or maybe I am deeply analyzing a dense, incredibly complex cell in a spreadsheet that requires me to lean in and narrow my eyes. The AI doesn't know why I'm squinting. It only knows that my facial geometry has deviated from the baseline of ideal focus.
I mean, no system is perfect, but
Take the data we have on students and early career professionals pulling late-night study or work sessions in the Philippines. The system flags their frequent blinks as fatigue. Now, biologically, that is an accurate assessment. They are tired. But in a quantified work environment, that natural fatigue is treated as a drop in an engagement metric.
that's a reporting issue, not a fundamental flaw in the tech.
It's an architectural flaw. The algorithm essentially treats a biological limitation as a failure to perform. If your performance review is tied to maintaining a low dispersion state of attention, and a camera is monitoring your pupil dilation to ensure you are sufficiently captivated by a tedious report, you are no longer just working.
So what are you doing?
You are physically acting out the symptoms of focus to satisfy a machine. That isn't supportive, it's deeply anxiety-inducing.
But that assumes the metric is universally used as a blunt weapon. It assumes management looks at a blink rate and fires someone.
Which happens
In edge cases. But if an accelerometer captures device tilts and infers that a user in a California office is constantly angling their phone for split-screen reading, that high attention dispersion is a signal. It's a signal that the environment or the task structure itself is failing the worker. The AI surfaces this analysis so we can fix the workflow.
or fix the worker.
When we talk about employee well-being, we have to acknowledge the reality of the modern brain. We're constantly context switching. We are fighting a losing battle against digital fragmentation, and human willpower alone isn't enough anymore.
So we surrender to a camera?
The AI's gaze, as intimidating as it might sound when we talk about analyzing facial geometry, it provides the objective, empirical data needed to reconstruct shattered focus. We need a mirror to show us how fractured our attention has become.
A mirror is passive. A mirror doesn't report back to your boss. But let's stretch that out, because this is where the real impact on well-being occurs. If the AI misinterprets my squinting or my device tilt at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, what happens when it builds a long-term profile of my entire work week based on those flawed micro-moments? We have to look at what happens when these isolated metrics are aggregated into broader daily routines.
I'm really glad you brought that up, actually, because zooming out from the individual minute to the broader chronogram of a day is where the predictive power of these systems actually offers an incredible degree of workplace flexibility.
Flexibility, right.
It stops being about a single moment of fatigue and becomes about understanding your overarching rhythm. The system uses temporal pattern mining. Think of it like building a highly localized weather forecast, but for your cognitive energy.
A weather forecast that dictates what jobs you're allowed to take.
No, a forecast that helps you optimize when you work best. The AI looks at historical sequence data to map your states of being. It learns the sequence of your habits, when you usually commute, when you dive into heavy analytical work, when you naturally taper off for leisure. And because it understands the dependencies between these events, it can mathematically link the fact that you had an unusually late night working yesterday to the high probability that you will have a sluggish, low-focus start today.
Sure, basic correlation.
Exactly. And when we apply this predictive mapping to the modern workforce, particularly distributed teams or gig workers, the benefits for well-being are undeniable. By modeling these energy chronograms, gig platforms can seamlessly match labor with biological realities.
Okay, but
Let me just finish this thought. They can automatically route evening delivery shifts or late-night coding bug fixes to night owls in the US, while offering early morning transcription gigs to early birds in Vietnam. It aligns the demands of the economy with the natural, probabilistic rhythms of the individual. That is the definition of supporting employee well-being. It is the exact opposite of forcing a natural night owl into a rigid, exhausted 7 a.m. corporate mold.
It sounds brilliantly utopian when you frame it entirely around the convenience of choosing your optimal hours, but this relies on a probabilistic modeling system that fundamentally misprofiles non-standard routines.
Does it?
Yes. These statistical engines calculate the most likely sequence of habits based on your historical data. They look for the path of least mathematical resistance. But what happens to the outliers? What happens to human spontaneity?
Well, the models account for variance. They don't expect you to be a robot executing the exact same routine down to the minute every single day.
They try to account for variance, but the data explicitly highlights massive biases against people whose lives do not neatly cluster into predictable daily chronograms. Look at the data on shift workers, like those in the mining sector in Australia.
Okay, unique environment.
But highly relevant. Their schedules are irregular by necessity, constantly rotating between days and nights. When an algorithmic system attempts to map a chronogram for a worker like that, it tries to establish a baseline where none exists. And here is the critical flaw. Once the system establishes what it thinks your habit sequence should be, any deviation from that established habit is mathematically flagged as an anomaly.
Because identifying a sudden shift in routine is a powerful way to spot when someone might be struggling, burning out, or dealing with an illness. It's an early warning system for well-being.
Or they are simply being spontaneous. Human well-being inherently requires spontaneity. It requires the freedom to break a routine without an algorithm logging an anomaly that could subtly affect your internal reliability score.
It doesn't always affect a score.
But the pressure is there. If I normally do deep work at 10 a.m., but today I decide to take a walk and brainstorm out loud instead, the system shouldn't flag me as having a chaotic attention dispersion. By relying on equations that calculate your most likely sequence of habits, the system inherently creates an invisible pressure to conform to your past behavior.
I think you're overstating the rigidity.
I don't think so. If a worker in that gig economy deviates from their established temporal cluster, say they try to take a morning shift when they are profiled as a night owl, do they stop getting matched with premium tasks? The flexibility you are talking about only exists as long as the human agrees to act like a perfectly predictable data set.
That's a fundamental misunderstanding of how dynamic these models are. They're constantly updating. If you start taking morning shifts, the model adapts and learns your new rhythm.
Eventually.
Relatively quickly, actually. But let's follow your logic to its direct consequence. We've talked about how the system builds schedules and aggregates metrics, but what does the daily friction of this actually look like? Let's talk about how the system interacts with employees in the real-time execution of their work, because this is where the AI becomes an active, helpful participant in the workflow.
You mean the automated nudges?
I mean the interventions, yes.
We see this extensively in distributed teams that span across multiple time zones, from Europe to Asia. Virtual meetings now utilize audio analysis to track speaking turns, conversational overlaps, and microphone muting patterns.
Which is a whole other level of surveillance.
Or support. If the system detects a zone out, let's say it registers a long period of silence from you, combined with rapid keyboard activity that indicates you're typing up an entirely different document, it nudges re-engagement.
It sends you a ping calling you out for multitasking?
It sends a private, subtle prompt, just a little notification on your screen. Now compare this to traditional management. In a physical office, a manager walks the floor. They hover over your desk, physically breathing down your neck, demanding your attention.
Which is terrible, yes.
That is heavy-handed, stressful micromanagement. An AI tracking system that sends a private, automated nudge to bring your attention back to a collaborative meeting is infinitely less stressful. It keeps distributed teams aligned, it ensures everyone's voice is heard, and it operates completely without the interpersonal friction, the bias, and the ego that always comes from human discipline. It is a helpful tool to maintain the focus we both agree is necessary.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered the underlying economic engine driving that friendly little ping? You are portraying the nudge as a gentle tap on the shoulder from a benevolent assistant. But we must look at the math dictating exactly why the AI decides to nudge you in that specific millisecond.
To re-engage you.
But why? These systems operate on economic utility functions designed to maximize yield from your attention.
Yes, they use standard economic models applied to attention. They look at your current engagement and calculate the likelihood of your future engagement dropping off.
Exactly. And the way they calculate that is by ruthlessly monetizing your attention. The equation literally discounts your future engagement by an impatience factor. The AI is calculating the exact micro moment you might drop off and intervening to extract the maximum possible yield of your focus before you do.
That's an extremely cynical reading of optimization.
It's like a payday loan for your cognitive energy. When we look at attention economy platforms, again, drawing on the real-world gig sector data, they don't just nudge you, they score your task completion speeds and use those metrics to directly influence your job matches and your payouts.
Well,
The nudge isn't just saying, hey, pay attention to the meeting. It is inherently tied to an entire back-end infrastructure that calculates your reliability, your speed, and your focus depth. It then dynamically adjusts your financial compensation based on those metrics.
but that is a specific critique of aggressive, unregulated gig platforms. It is not a universal law of how AI monitoring must be applied in a standard enterprise environment.
It is the clear trajectory of the technology. When an AI system treats human attention as a raw resource that is scarcer than time and values it at billions of dollars in corporate revenue, that pressure always trickles down to the individual worker.
Not if it's managed responsibly.
But look at the incentives. If your payout or your promotion is influenced by how quickly you complete a task, and your speed is being monitored by the rhythm of your keystrokes and the analysis of your microphone, that institutionalizes financial stress. The employee becomes constantly, painfully aware that their micro behaviors, taking a long pause to think deeply about a problem, or muting a mic to clear their throat, could be misinterpreted by an algorithm and directly affect their livelihood. That strips away the psychological safety that is absolutely essential for true deep work. You cannot achieve flow state when you feel like you are standing in an algorithmic panopticon.
I think we have to separate the fundamental capability of the tool from the most exploitative edge cases of its implementation. I will absolutely acknowledge that there are privacy risks, and the danger of tying a worker's pay strictly to behavioral micrometrics is very real and very damaging.
Very damaging.
If a company uses variable reward schedules to trick people into prolonging their work sessions, that is an abuse of the technology. But the engineering data also points to the solutions.
You mean keeping the data local?
Right, using architectures like federated learning or edge computing. This means your laptop or your phone processes your keystroke rhythms and your temporal habits locally, right on the device.
Okay, that's better, but
The AI learns your peak focus windows and helps you manage your day. But it never sends your raw behavioral surveillance data back to a central corporate server for your boss to review. It just sends back the localized insights. When used ethically and privately, temporal clustering and focus tracking are incredibly powerful. They are necessary tools for optimizing deep work and reducing the sheer unmanageable stress of unstructured modern labor. We have built a digital environment that is too noisy for the human brain to handle alone. We need the AI's help to navigate it.
I actually agree that understanding our own habits is incredibly valuable. If an individual uses a time tracker to reveal their own focus patterns, or actively chooses to use an AI to block their own distractions, that is empowering self-management.
Exactly.
But there is a massive fundamental chasm between self-management and institutional surveillance. When a corporation implements granular tracking from the top down, it inherently prioritizes algorithmic predictability over human flexibility and mental health. The psychological cost of knowing an AI is evaluating the validity of your focus by measuring the physical geometry of your face is simply outweighs the productivity gains of forced alignment. It turns the human experience of work into an endless performance.
It is a profound complexity, and clearly not one with an easy answer. The creation of a quantified self in the workplace is not something we can simply undo at this point. The technology is already woven deeply into the fabric of global labor, monitoring workflows from dawn in Sydney to dusk in Lima.
And the debate over whether the resulting productivity gains are genuinely worth that psychological cost will only intensify as the computer vision and predictive modeling become even more sophisticated.
Absolutely. There is so much more to explore in this material. We barely had time to touch on how shifting processing to edge computing might permanently tilt the balance of power back to the user, or how emerging legal frameworks might eventually step in to curb the exploitative designs you are so rightly concerned about.
Regulation is absolutely going to be the next great battlefield for the quantified worker. It has to be.
Without a doubt. But we will leave the discussion there for today, leaving it to you, the listener, to form your own conclusion on where the balance lies. Think about it the next time you log on to start your day. The punch clock is no longer a heavy machine waiting for you at the factory door. It is invisible, it is in your pocket, and it is quietly analyzing the very cadence of your thoughts.
And it never stops ticking.
Until next time.